Hey everybody, welcome, welcome. Happy to have you tuning into another Sales Hacker live event. Thank you all for being here, including our wonderful speakers today. As we give everybody just a few minutes to join in, I've got a few things that I want to share. The Sales Hacker team is running a confidential survey on the state of sales tech stack. I will drop a link to that in the chat. It takes about 15 minutes. You can tell us what you really think. Completed surveys are eligible for a $500 gift card. We will do that drawing on October 10th. So at the end of the survey, you'll get it. There'll be a spot to put in your email if you want to enter into that competition for that drawing. Here's the link to that. Today's event is sponsored by SalesScreen. We've got Dana Maribel and Hillman Sori and Nick Sproul with us here today to talk about how to build predictable pipeline to steady your course to revenue and make sure that you hit your number. 60% of sales leaders are not confident that they're going to hit their revenue goals. With the global market more reactive and volatile than ever, this is incredibly stressful for both sales reps and management. So stick around if you've got questions or want to hear how to instill behaviors in sellers that will lead to consistency in building pipeline, how to bake accountability and best practices into your sales force, how to utilize data to quickly pivot strategies before it's too late, how to enable transparency into deal progression and increase the reliability of your CRM so that you can forecast accurately. All right, so we want today's event to be super interactive and engaging for everybody. So let's get familiar with the chat. To do that, go down to your chat, which is on the bottom right. There'll be a little blue box. It's on host and panelists right now, but you'll need to toggle that to everybody. So make sure that's working. Drop a 4 in the chat if you're an SDR. If you're an AE, drop a 5. If you're a SDR manager, drop a 7. And if you're a sales leader, drop a 9. If it's something different, then be sure to drop that in the chat as well. At any point, if you've got questions or thoughts, drop those in the chat as well. We'll make sure that we're keeping an eye out over there. We want to make sure that we cater today's conversation to you as best we can. And if you'd rather your question be anonymous, we've got the Q&A box there for you, so no worries. All right, another quick thing before I hand the mic over to Dana. We want to provide a space for you all to network, so feel free to drop your LinkedIn profile, make those connections. If you're hiring or if you're looking for a job, feel free to put that in the chat as well. Share where you're tuning in from. I'm on the east side. I'm north of Atlanta. It's crazy to see how broad the attendees are. So, drop where you're tuning in from in the chat as well. All right, Dana, that's it from me. I'm going to pass things over to you to give a quick intro of yourself and then pass it on over to Nick and Hillman before we dive in.
All right, sounds good. Of course, my dog is freaking out in the background, so I'll apologize already for the barking that may occur in a couple of minutes. But I'm Dana Marabella. I'm the VP of Customer Success at SalesScreen. We're a sales gamification platform that helps make work more exciting and fun. And we work primarily with sales leaders, making those day-to-day activities kind of competitive so that it really impacts your bottom line. So this is something that I talk to customers about all the time. Always, where's my pipeline? How am I going to hit my goal? I can't believe it's already end of the quarter. So really excited to talk about this topic and also to have Hillman and Nick join me, and I'll let them introduce themselves before we get started. So Hillman, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I love this active chat. This is fantastic. My name is Hillman Sori. I'm the co-founder of Coach CRM, where we are endeavoring to make coaching a competitive advantage for sales teams. I'm also the co-founder of Closed Loop Sales Management Consulting Firm. And this is what we do. This is what I live and breathe all day long. So I'm excited to have the conversation. Looking forward to the folks who are participating, kicking in their thoughts in chat so that this is highly tailored to what you showed up to get out of this conversation. Nick?
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Nick Sproul. I head up our SDR operations at Second Nature. We're a sales coaching, sales training platform specializing in two-way AI conversations. So think of us as the batting practice before the game, and Gong is kind of your post-game film. So I'm very excited to kind of talk through this, and sales coaching is kind of a passion of mine, just given by the nature of the product that me and my team get to sell every day.
Awesome. All right. Lots of different roles in the chat, ton of different locations, Italy, Philippines, Cyprus. So we definitely have a unique crowd. And like Savannah said, we really want you guys to be active in the chat. Please ask questions, provide comments. I'll be monitoring it as well as Savannah as we have this talk, but really want it to be interactive and include any thoughts or questions that are top of mind for you. Ultimately, this is what you get out of it. So we're happy to pivot however we need to. So we're already moving into the end of the year, which is crazy. There are, just a little over 3 months left of 2022. And everyone is thinking about how they're going to hit their target, close out the year, beat last year, really driving consistency with those activities, especially as the holiday comes up and there's just so many things going on. So Nick, maybe you can kick us off with just some of the ways you motivate your team to keep their activities and pipeline building up when there seems to be so much happening around us. How do you really keep your team focused?
Yeah, for me, I've always been, even as an SDR, is very analytical and made the data kind of my friend. So I'm always looking for new ways for us to engage with prospects and customers. So closed lost or any ones that we've nurtured, those are always good ones because those are going to be warmer conversations. Even if they're not going to buy from you right now, at least that can help build up the rep's confidence by having a conversation with someone that's actually familiar with your product and maybe went through a sales cycle and just timing might not have been right. Outside of that, yeah, we recently launched some account scoring, which kind of allows us to prioritize a little bit better. It seems right now that sales coaching seems to be a hot topic in the market. So we're definitely having some really good conversations, but, and actually Rosalind St. Elena posted this morning about making data kind of your friend. So you want the data to be your friend, making sure that your CRM is clean, your sales enablement platform, keeping notes on your prospects will definitely help, especially as we get closer to the end of the year.
Awesome. So for those of you in the audience, Nick's kind of tips and tricks there, one included account scoring. So if you're doing that, please put a number 1 in there so we can kind of see if that's familiar. And going back to the closed losses, I love that. So if that's something that you're also planning for the end of the year, drop a number 2 in there so we can see if that's also common. And if there's something that like you're super excited about that you're trying, feel free to go random and drop it in the chat and we'll kind of take a look at that. As Hillman kicks us off with kind of switching gears a little bit, right, from the IC to the managers, you're coaching managers and ICs all the time. Do you have anything to add to Nick's kind of response on something that you feel has really worked for you or worked for your clients that you want to share with the group?
Well, first off, generally, I love the idea of making data your friend, right? And there's so much data these days. You have so many different systems that they're all churning up different dashboards. A dashboard is kind of brass tacks for B2B SaaS software. So you might be managing multiple dashboards. And it's really important to understand what data is important for your organization from a coaching perspective and from a sales leadership perspective. I also love that Nick said, make sure your CRM data is clean. Like I've never seen that be the case. I think it is absolutely something that's best practices, but I have yet to see in the literally thousands of companies I've worked in, unless they have just rolled out a CRM where that CRM hygiene is really where it needs to be. But yeah, the degree to which you can do that effectively, I think is important. Breaking it down to like what you are doing on a daily basis. I think that Dana, you led off by saying, in this world where we've got 3 months left and, you're dealing with war, you're dealing with post-COVID, hopefully we're post-COVID, right? You're dealing with so many things in the news. We're dealing with, is it a recession? Is it not a recession? It's an inflationary economy, all these types of things happening. I'm working from home. There's a quitter thing, all this stuff, right? It can be very easy for you to just get lost in the chaos, right? And I'm a huge fan, whether you're an IC or whether you're a leader, and both for yourself, if you're a leader, and for your team, of managing what you can control. in leadership, the onus is on you to kind of set the vision and keep folks focused, narrow focused, keep the aperture really tight on the things that they can control. I'm a huge fan of marginal gains theory, right? Where 1% impact every day, 1% better each day in aggregate correlates to a really huge impact at the end of some periodic, some period of time. So looking at what you can control within the scope of your job to be done is what's critical. It's the only thing that you can actually do in a given day. So whether that's a certain amount of activity, whether it's quality, whether it's quantity, whatever it might be, the extent to which you can define what that's going to be on a daily basis gives you successive wins. You talk about how do you motivate a team? A team is motivated by success, right? You can't make success a balloon payment that occurs at the end of the quarter, end of a month, end of a year. Success has to be something that we hearken back to on a daily basis, and that's how you create that culture that becomes like a flywheel and keeps things moving forward. So those are a couple pieces in abstract that I think are critically important.
Yeah. I love that 1%, right? Like, I think sometimes whether you're a sales leader or you're an SDR or an AE, to your point, you get overwhelmed by the chaos and your to-do list seems to grow so much. And if you just focus on one thing per day, I tell my team this all the time, like, block your calendar and just do one thing, right? Like, if you complete one thing today, you'll feel so successful. And I feel like as managers, every single one of us have probably said, like, celebrate the at-bats. Like, to your point, that balloon payment isn't going to make you feel great every single day. So how do you celebrate those like small activities that eventually will add up to that huge balloon payment? And you're like, wow, I know exactly how I got here, which is like amazing for someone to see that progression day over day or week over week. But to your point, wait until the end of the quarter can kind of be deflating in some ways, for sure.
And then another piece to that, if I could just add there, is that to your point, you have that success, you realize what created that success, you rinse and you repeat, and then this becomes something that's muscle memory and you can move on to the next bigger thing, right? You create the habit loop, and that habit loop correlates to this really massive impact over a period of time, and you keep creating additional habits that create a really solid performance over a significant period of time.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about like the 1%, kind of these three things that Nick and his team are doing, he even added a fourth in there with sales navigator intent. Those are kind of the behaviors, but it is hard to drive accountability, right? When we think about, like, we all know in some cases what it takes to do the job, right? Like, you're an SDR, you're making calls, you're booking meetings, you're an AE, you're moving opportunities. And it sounds like you could just do it, but sometimes it is hard to really think about how you drive that accountability. I struggle with this with my own team sometimes, especially at the end of the year with so much going on. So I'm going to throw it back to Hillman and just say, like, when you think about all the things that I see may be able to drive or is trying to drive, what are some of the tricks that they may be able to do to like hold themselves accountable, right? Like, you gave them this great 1% idea.
Yeah.
But is there anything else that you can kind of share that might help them move the needle?
I'm a huge fan of acronyms, and I look at COACH as an acronym. And this is something that we have rolled out to managers. It's something that also could be really impactful for you as an individual, as you think about how you're going to go about your day and where you're going to expend your energy. One thing, to your point, there's so many things that you could be doing, so many things that you could be impacting. If you're going to take off a big challenge, the idea is try to find something that is going to have a significant impact as a domino effect, right? So instead of taking all the 50 things that you could be doing at any given time, evaluate what those 50 things are and say, this one thing, if I were able to nail this on a consistent basis and perform at this at a higher level of impact, then that is actually going to have a significant impact on my results throughout all of my performance, right? So identifying that one challenge, it's kind of the idea of, like, even in a manager's role, you can't throw 10 tennis balls at somebody and expect them to catch it. It's not going to happen effectively, right? So figure out what that one thing is, and that might take some time and some evaluation, might take some talking to mentors or talking to peers. Then once you've identified that thing, you've got to understand from a coaching perspective, it's all about the gap. Right? Coaching is about moving performance from where it is today to where you'd like it to be. Well, you got to identify where you want to be. What does success look like? And then outlining that path to success by reverse engineering, saying, okay, if this is the ideal, then the step before the ideal looks like this. The step to get there is that. And then, the thing I need to do tomorrow is be able to do this thing impactfully. Then you develop an action plan. And that action plan could be something as casual as setting down the specific behaviors that you're going to do on a given basis, or something even more formal like an OKR or a KPI, or even SMART goals if people are familiar with that acronym. Choose whatever your jam is, whatever the thing is that is easy for you to do and that you have at this point in your life done successfully before. This is the upshot of anybody who's in a sales role today. You got there because you were hired because you've demonstrated some success previously. You've had some performance success, whether it's academically, whether it's in a previous role, whether it's athletically, whatever it might be. You already have in your brain that track worn that shows how Hillman goes and performs, how Hillman goes and learns, how Hillman adapts new habits, right? Go back to that. Don't start something net new. Go back to what's worked with you before. Understanding the consequences, that's the second C in coach, right? Consequences don't have to be draconian. They don't even have to be negative. A consequence could be, hey, I hit my number. A consequence could be, hey, I ramp more quickly. A consequence could be, hey, I'm in line for a promotion because I've demonstrated successive quarters of hitting my goal, right? Whatever it might be, understand the consequences, because that's the why. That's what's going to get you up every day, get you motivated every day, get you in the seat doing the behavior every day. And in the absence of that, it's very easy to feel like you're just a cog in the wheel in an organization and you're just doing my thing, trying to hit a number, in a thankful role where you're getting rejected more than half the time, right? And then finally is that last piece that you asked about, which is how do you hold yourself accountable? I think one great way to hold yourself accountable is to share the challenge with folks on your team who are supportive. It could be a manager, it could be a mentor, it could be a peer in another part of the organization. Once you've kind of spoken it, it now exists, and there are people there who are going to be supportive for you. I'm also a huge fan, I log into probably 10 to 15 different types of accounts every day. I make my password my short-term challenge or goal, whatever, or the action plan that I'm trying to complete, so that every time I type it, it's a realization that I've got to do something with it. Again, most people have their own means of doing these things. Don't go net new. Go for what's worked for you. But I see coach as an acronym, and you can apply this either to your team or you can apply it to yourself as an individual.
Yep. Awesome. I love that. I'm going to stop the share so everyone can see our faces again. I think the really cool thing that you call out there that I think so many SDRs and AEs sometimes forget, especially in the times when they're frustrated, is like they know their plan, right? Like they know why they were hired. They know what they're good at. They know what works for them. And I tell my team that all the time, like, I'm here to guide you, but like you as the individual, like if what I'm saying doesn't jive with you or you feel like there's a better path, do it.
Right.
I don't care. I just want you to hit the results and feel successful. And I think so many times people forget that and get stuck in what they're supposed to do and forget that it's like within you, right? Like I love the action plan that you can set up for yourself. You know what you're capable every day. If the goal is 10 calls and you want to make 20, do it. If the goal is 10 calls and you're not feeling it today, do 20 tomorrow, right? I think there's some ways that you can like play with your own motivation and your own skill set that help you to feel like the action plan makes sense for you. And so many times we forget that. So I love that call out. I think for me, that's going to be like my biggest takeaway. And I tell my team that, right? And I think as us as an individual, like challenge your manager, like, hey, I don't think it's going to work for me. I'm going to do it this way. I still think I'm going to get to the result. Does that sound good to you? Like most managers are going to say, yeah, because you're still going to get to the result, which I think is great.
Can I add one thing there, Dana, that I think is really important, that I've coached a lot of folks on, is sometimes we sit and we wait for the motivation. And motivation is hard. Habit is easy. If I'm in the habit of going to the gym every day at 2 p.m., then that becomes something that I just do. And then I begin to reap the benefits of having done that, whether it's a dopamine hit, whether it's fitness, whether it's health, whatever it might be. I am seldom motivated at 2 p.m. to get up from my desk and march over and go to never, right? If I waited for that, then it just wouldn't happen. So the real key is to create those habit loops so that you just sink into it on a regular basis. And then what you'll find is because you've created the habit, you're actually reaping the reward of the result. And that result is what actually becomes the motivation to continue to do things.
Yep. I love that. Nick, what do you kind of use in the same kind of realm around like holding yourself accountable or your team accountable? Do you have any other best practices or tips and tricks that you can share with the group?
Yeah, we use what we call an effective day scorecard. So an SDR is not going to book a meeting every day. That's just how it works. So you got to have some other things that can kind of boost up your morale and your confidence. So we have kind of 6 kind of points that we look at. So that's how many new contacts did you add into your sequences? How many conversations did you have? Obviously, how many meetings did you book? Did any deals get generated? And did you spend any time on professional development? So there's basically a point for each, and your goal is to get to 8 at the end of the day. And we can kind of gamify that as well. In addition to that, especially around the holiday time, it can be hard to reach people. So really going back to the basics. And for us, that's really getting into our tool, going through our different simulations, and that can really kind of boost your confidence by like, oh, I did this training, I got a 99 on it. So I'm ready to get back at it and get back on the phones. So those are a couple of things that I like to kind of instill in my team and do here at Second Nature that really helps us out and stay accountable.
Yeah, I love that. I think, I struggle with the accountability piece. And one thing that I've really learned at SalesScreen has been like each member of my team is different, right? Which is why I love Hillman kind of called that out. Like your goals are different, your skill set is different, or even like Nick's point, right? Everyone's going to come up with their own points, right? Maybe it's not a meeting and you rather focus on calls today, but you still get the 8 points for that scorecard. The other thing that we really try to focus on internally and also with our customer base are these kind of like 4 cogs, right? That like help us think about the individual. So like some people on my team are very visual, right? And they just want to see the leaderboard or the scoreboard, the scorecard of, okay, I'm at 6 points, I need to get to 8 points. Or there's milestones that they want to know they're close to hitting, and then we'll celebrate those milestones, but they need to like see it, right? Other people on the team want to compete about everything, right? Like you have those killers on your team. That's their profile. They want to be the best, beat the people on the team, be number 1 all the time. And there's obviously competitions and spiffs that you can do there that definitely hold your team accountable. And then similar to what we said with the visualization, there's milestones or like achievements, like you made the most calls you've ever made this week. And they love that. They're competing against their own intrinsic motivation that comes from within. And not that they don't care about the team around them, but they know they're trying to beat their own goal. And then I think something that we haven't talked about that is definitely missing from some people's kind of vocabulary or maybe like their day-to-day, it's just not a habit, right? Like we're so focused on the goal and the activity and how we're going to hit our target that we do forget to celebrate or recognize those at-bats, right? And I think for your middle performers, this is so important because when you're kind of sitting in the middle, right, there's always going to be that killer, that number 1 who's always on top, always crushes it, always kills it. When you're more in that middle field, or even sometimes when you're in the bottom and you're really trying to push yourself to perform, you want to be celebrated and recognized. And that also means different things for different people, right? Like some people want prizes and they're like, again, money motivated, right? And that is how they think about winning competitions or spiffs, or if they get that badge, maybe it's like a plaque or something that also comes with a monetary prize. But there's also just like endorsements, like, hey, great job this week. You could share it in Slack or whatever the team channel is, especially now that we're in this half remote environment, where you really call out that success from someone as a manager, or encourage your team to think about like shout outs through one another, right? Like we used to do this Rock the House award every week, and it didn't come from management. It came from individuals on the field calling out other individuals in the field. So I encourage you all to think about this, whether you're an AE, an SDR, or a manager. How do we think about like what those expectations are for you, whether it's a scorecard or that 1% activity that you're trying to do? Like, what do you need to feel that accountability or motivation? Is it like the visual parts of it? Do you love to compete? How do you want to be recognized? And especially with the end of year craziness, like don't be afraid to tell your manager, hey, I need a little bit more in this, right? Or as a manager, ask your team, am I giving you guys enough to hold yourselves accountable? Do you feel like these goals are attainable? How can I help? How can I motivate you? It could be as simple as like a leaderboard, right? Like go back old school style and put the whiteboard up and put it behind you, and every team meeting, talk about it. There's a million ways that you can do this with or without technology that could really help to motivate your teams.
Hey, Dana, question for you. The Rock the House, is that done through Slack? First off, do you have a distributed workforce and are folks working from home and remote or hybrid? That's the first question, and how you're doing that. And I'd also love to know from folks who are in the chat what they're doing in their orgs to kind of keep that cohesive team collaboration thing happening if they do have a hybrid or a work from home type of a sales team. I'm always curious how that's working out for folks.
For us at Sales Screen, it's more remote than ever, right? And we're an international company. So the majority of our workforce actually sits in Europe, whether it be in Norway or Barcelona. And then across the US, we're kind of spread out all over the place. So I would say we're majority remote for sure. And the way that we do that, and Rock the House didn't happen at Sales Screen, but now I think I'm going to have to bring it to Sales Screen, especially after this. But what we do at Sales Screen, like we use our own platform, right? Like we kind of drink our own Kool-Aid, and there's things that we can do there to help in our all hands meetings. So we do an all hands every Friday. Our CEO calls out the achievements that each person has done or achieved those milestones, right? So you get a badge in the platform, it shows up in the feed. And then we also have a way that you can download it so you can pull it into your slides for your all hands meetings. And even more, like the IC can push it out to LinkedIn. So for those who are like more socialites, right? And like love the likes, the comments, they kind of want to show it. That's their player profile. And that's totally fine. They can push it out to LinkedIn. So that's how we celebrate kind of those milestones that like we as a management team are setting. But we also have endorsements through the platform where the ICs can call out one another, and it happens all the time, like AE to CSM, SDR to AE, like just calling it out, or even like random R&D. Hey, heard that the sales conversation happened in the office. This was amazing. Or like saw the notes in Sales Screen that you just closed an opportunity. Way to go, dude. Here's 50 coins, right? And we kind of have a mix of both. So we try to do it in multiple ways where it's happening in the platform organically. When that actually happens, it's definitely a leadership priority. So for the managers on the call, like if your leaders, like if your executive team isn't calling this stuff out, make them do it. Shout from the rooftops, especially in Q4. You'd be surprised what an executive call out does to an IC's motivation, like knowing that that call mattered, that deal mattered. It really does go such a long way. But think about, Rock the House Awards at my previous job was literally in an all hands meeting. The first 5 minutes, raise your hand if you want to give someone a Rock the House shout out. There's nothing else that came with it other than like you got to call out your peer in a all hands meeting and everyone heard it and clapped after. And it was a hit.
Very cool. Sounds like Petra would agree with you in the chat.
All right. Any other, I know that you also asked the audience, we're seeing Petra agreeing here. Ringing a bell is an old school one, right? Like ring the gong, and you can do that in Slack remotely with a video or a GIF or something. Every time it happens to your sales team, maybe there's a video that posts. There's so many of those things you could do still in a remote environment. Any other ones? Should we give the people in the chat? I know it's Thursday afternoon, almost Friday for some of us, some of you very late at night who are joining us from Europe. Okay. So the other thing that we definitely have focused on, and it has come up already, is how important data is, right? Like the data cleanup, looking at your closed loss, which you have to have clean data. So overall, like the data is so important in the pipeline and activity management, both for you as an individual, if it's something that you're tracking towards, and for your managers. So what are some of those like best practices of data sources or adjusting your strategy using data with enough time to drive an impact that you've kind of coached people on, Haman, in the past, right? Like, is there anything that you've ever done or seen someone really push that was like, wow, you went from A to B so quickly, and here's how you use data?
Yeah, I love the question. I'm also noticing Joe Cortez dropped something only to the host and panelists that I think the rest of everybody would laugh at with respect to how they cheer people on. We have a James Brown 2-foot figurine that sings, "Wow, I feel good that a sales rep gets to hit when they close a deal over a certain dollar amount. That is awesome.
That's an
All right,
upgrade.
I couldn't let that go.
Sure.
He didn't hit everyone. It just went to the panelists. So I had to share that. Thank you. So back to your question with respect to data. So a couple things that I think about. Again, I said earlier, there are so many data sources. It's almost overwhelming. How many dashboards and how many pieces of either anecdata or, you've sometimes got vanity metrics. You've got all these other things that are just kind of out there. And then you've got what you need to run the business. And the onus is on someone in the organization. Maybe it's someone who's in operations. Maybe it's someone who's in enablement. Maybe it's a manager, depending upon the size of the company. And also, obviously, each individual needs to understand the data for their patch and what they're trying to achieve. But you got to have a single source of truth. And to Nick's point, that single source of truth has to be reliable. And that reliability falls directly to that garbage in, garbage out thing. You've got to be able to ensure that what you're asking your sales team to input is relevant, first of all, is going to be reflected back to them in a way where it's like, I'm inputting this data. Am I just doing this for management, or is there some way in which this is clearing the path and shining the light on the things that I need to be doing, right? And then it has to be something that I can do in workflow, right? You can't park data as that thing that I have to do when I'm watching a game on Sunday evening, and then it's ex post facto, and I'm kind of trying to remember some narrative. The last piece here is it needs to be structured. Right? Anybody who leverages data for any sort of reporting understands that unstructured data has, limited efficacy. So the goal here is to take all that and to synthesize it into something that's really just keep it as simple as you possibly can, that allows for you to be able to manage the business going forward. Based upon that, you've got to be able to make some sort of hypothesis, right? So if I'm leveraging historical data, and maybe that historical data has to do with conversion from stage to stage. Let's make it really easy inside of a CRM, right? If I understand that my conversion top of funnel to a discovery call is this, and my conversion from discovery to demo is that, and my conversion demo to whatever happens down further in later stages is the other, then I know the volume of activity that I need, which then correlates back to what we were saying before of what do I need to do today. So if you can't extrapolate from the systems that you're using enough intelligence that allows you to understand the activity necessary, then you've got a problem. And that problem can only be solved through some of the things that Nick started the whole conversation out with respect to data hygiene, data management, data controls, et cetera, and ensuring that that stuff is impactful. The other thing that you're looking for here from a management perspective is, what are the leading indicators for my metrics? Right? It's not enough to just come and report at the end of the quarter. I can't tell you how many times I'm talking to C-level individuals who come and say, I don't know what happened. We had a forecast. We had a number of different meetings, and then suddenly 11th hour, we're at the end of the quarter and we didn't hit, and we missed by this huge chasm. We should have known this ahead of time. It's as simple as, one easy tell is looking at a CRM, and if you as an IC or your team as a manager has the 30th or 31st of every month as the day that a deal is going to close, that's probably not accurate, right? I doubt you were talking to your prospect and they said, yes, all 16 of my prospects are closing on the 31st. Probably not true. Probably just a person ticking a box because they've got to fill in the Salesforce field, or sorry, it's the CRM of choice field. Let's be agnostic there. So anyway, that's the goal, right? Single source of truth. Make sure that you're creating fields that are actionable and that provide data that you can leverage into reporting. Make sure you're making some sort of a hypothesis and evaluating that data going forward. Look for leading indicators, and that allows you to pivot directionally in anticipating either market challenges or challenges to your own business.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a question in the chat, like, how do you measure the quality of the activities? And I think that kind of ties into the quality of your data, which you kind of just hit on the head, right? If you as an executive or a manager, can't really derive those outcomes or the impact of what's happening in your data sources, and you're like, hey, at the end of the quarter, how did this happen? Or you're looking at your data input and every deal is closing the 31st, you probably have a data quality issue where you're starting to think about it, right? And I think that's one of the things that we really help our customers do is again, break it down, right? So the quality of your data is as good as the activities that your team is driving. Then what do you do with those activities? Or how do you kind of come up with that story of, okay, if we do this and we continue on this path or this scorecard, what are our business outcomes going to be? And if you feel like you're going to come up short, going back to those motivation tactics of, hey, am I sharing the data with my team enough? Do they know where we are?
Yeah.
Am I hitting on each piece of that to motivate them to, to push to that outcome. And I think Gretchen also calls this out with, pipeline health is her jam, which I totally can relate to. And I think so many of you from a customer standpoint can as well, is, if your pipeline isn't accurate, those close dates, the next steps, the stages, you have no idea what's going on with your ICs. And it's impossible to step into every single deal and make sure that it's accurate. So pushing that, pipeline health, data accuracy, I think really will help the quality overall. And I think when your team misses and you're calling that out and you're trying to coach them on that, that kind of motivates the individual as well to say like, ooh, man, I got to change something up for sure. Nick, anything to add to that you, whether you're using the data or you push your team to use data that you think is really helpful that we haven't touched upon yet?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mix of that, the account score that we've recently kind of been leveraging with the intent information that we're getting, plus obviously that closed loss loop, leveraging Sales Navigator and the intent that you can see in there. So that'll be really low hanging fruit for us to leverage. And then obviously knowing where you stand day to day on that. But yeah, you definitely want to keep it clean. And one thing I always stress is that when it comes to your daily activities, you want it to be consistent across the board. Because if you're going from like 100 then down to 40, then maybe up to 120 and then back down, like at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, whether you exceed it or maybe you fell short, you're not going to know what levers to pull if there hasn't been consistency. Because that way you can really get into the data and see like, okay, well, you had a lot of success on social. Maybe we want to leverage that a little bit more. So that way you can help the reps know what levers they need to pull on either side of whatever channel seems to be producing the most success.
Yeah, I think Gretchen is definitely hot on this topic and sharing some of the things that she's looking at, which is amazing. And I think the 80-20 rule that she mentioned is great, right? Like, 80% of the time you want a clean pipeline, but 20% of the time, you might have those outliers that you need to help your team clean up, which I think makes total sense. I think, from a coaching standpoint, Hillman's definitely worked with so many organizations to help drive behavior. And I know you've talked about that. But how do you think about like the transparency into deal progression while focusing on that like reliability? I know, you mentioned some things that you're looking at, but is there anything else or like tips and tricks for the managers or even for the ICs that you can think about? Like, how do you use this data, these behaviors, the activities? Like, how do you tie it all together so you do know where you may land at the end of this year?
Yeah, I'll tell you, my answer to that is don't do tips and tricks. Really, the answer in my mind is that you've got to instill methodology, because methodology creates consistency of structure. It creates consistency with respect to the metrics and data that you're looking at. It allows you to inspect the things that you're expecting. If Dana is running, her own sales way of doing things, and Nick's got his, Nick 24/6 way that he goes and does his calls, and Hillman is using something like Medic, and it's combined with Bant and some Frankenstein, something else. From a management perspective, there's no control. Right. And there is no insight and there's no transparency because there's been no rigor, and therefore there can be no accountability. The other thing that is absent there is I can't coach 16 different people on their own little way of doing stuff. Right. So the idea here is not to, snip people's wings or to tamp down authenticity, but instead to identify as an organization, this is how we're going to market. This is how we are going to manage our sales process. This is how we have identified we most effectively navigate calls. These are the pain questions that we use to uncover pain. This is how we end calls so that we get velocity into the next step. All of these different mechanics that I'm sure folks who are on the webinar already understand, but distilling them into things that work in a really important way. And that is, there's a tactical level of execution, which is me on the phone as a salesperson. And then there's this thing that's happening in the organization at even the board level or the management level, which is the strategy for how we're going to market. And maybe we're going upstream. Maybe we need to increase ACV or ASP, or who knows what the objectives are for your organization. And often there's a real disconnect between the two. And the disconnect exists because sometimes in that tactical execution, it's a little bit of a black box. So what you need to do is to be able to open that through the use of both sales process, sales playbooks, and sales methodology so that there's a clear lens bidirectionally so that I, on my calls and in my conversation with a prospect, understand the objectives of the organization strategically. I also understand tactically the skills I need to employ to be able to pull that off, right? And then at the level of management or leadership, I can clearly listen to a call, review the CRM, whatever it might be, and get insight into whether or not our strategic objectives are actually being carried out on a tactical level. That's where, you asked where do we do a lot of our work, right? On the closed loop side, that's where we come in and make that transparency key. And that's where you create this cohesive means of being able to unite the organization around data and execute really impactfully that gives you competitive advantage.
Amazing. I love that. I love don't do your own thing, right? I think sometimes as a seller, when you're not feeling the results or not as successful, or even as an SDR, I'm going to veer off the path and maybe try this, right? And it does make it.
You go to LinkedIn and you'll get the latest tip, right? Yeah. That's really valid. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I'm struggling with this. What does LinkedIn say?
Exactly.
But I love that to kind of stay consistent there. We do have 5 more minutes, so we definitely have time for questions. And as you guys kind of think about what those may be, we did put together, and I'm sure we'll share this after, but just, a recap of some of the things that we did speak about. I know we just said no tips and tricks, but these are more of our highlights. I guess we should change it to the top highlights when you're thinking about your goals, but consistency is key. I love that everyone really focused on like the 1%, the at-bats, the small little repeatable behaviors that you can do. I mean, that's something that at SalesScreen, we really help our customers think about, and it goes such a long way with your bottom line. With creating accountability, love the coach approach. I'm also a sucker for a good acronym, so love that Hillman included this. But identifying the challenge, making sure you're encouraging everyone, their own path to success, their own action plan based on their skills, understanding what's going to happen if you don't hit that plan, and then really holding yourself accountable because you've set it up for the individual. I love that part of this. And then just really thinking about your strategy, right? Your business, you have the single source of truth, trying to keep everyone together, right? Keep it simple, not having so many people doing their own things. We all talked about data. Gretchen had some amazing hits here too, like just things that she's looking at, the scorecard, the 80-20 rule, all of that. And then I think for everyone, focusing on what you can control and remembering that, the end of year is crazy. There's a lot going on, but again, those small at-bats or really focusing on your own skill set is something that's totally within your reach that you can do to maintain that consistent activity pipeline and really crush it in 2022. So let me know if anyone, I think we have enough questions. Daniel gives Gretchen a rock the house. That was amazing. So thank you for your active chats. It doesn't look like there's anything right now, but our contact information will be shared if you guys think of anything afterwards. This webinar was recorded, so you'll get it, but happy to help or have additional conversations if that comes up. But cheers to 2022. I can't believe it's almost over. It's insane. And crush Q4. And hopefully this was helpful for you all. And thank you to Nick and Hillman for all your secrets and tips and tricks and just being great co-webinar panelists. It was amazing to have you. Thank
you, Dana, Savannah, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here and for all of you for joining us and sharing your insight. We've got some fun events coming up next week. We've got the Science of Selling, how to hit new levels of sale efficiency. That's on Tuesday. And then next Thursday, we've got an open discussion on the wage gap driven by race and gender for Black women's equality payday. So be sure to tune in on those, and we look forward to next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks a lot. Bye.